Hello and welcome to our lesson on simple interest. So this is going to be a module about financial aspects such as simple interest, something called compound interest, and how we can apply some of these things to loans. I think namely we'll be talking about mortgages, but we'll also be talking about different investments that we can make. But to start, what is simple interest? Well, let's start with what is interest. Okay, interest, really you can think about it as a fee. Okay, think about interest like a fee. Now, it could be a fee that is charged on a loan. So if the fee is charged on a loan, you borrow some money, you're charged an interest fee. That means that you would have to pay it to whoever lent you the money. Or it could be something that is earned on an investment. So if you put money into a savings account, for example, and you're earning interest, then it's still a fee, but it's going to be a fee that is paid to you. So it's charged on money that you could borrow and you would have to pay it, or it's earned on an investment and someone would be paying you. Okay, but in either case, interest is a fee. Now, if we're looking at what we call simple interest versus compound, which we'll get to in our next topic, the simple interest is going to be calculated just once, one time over a set period. And usually simple interest will apply to things like car loans or short-term loans or small investments like savings accounts. Okay, and again, I'll compare this to the other common type of interest that we'll see, which is compound interest. So we have a formula for simple interest. Our formula says I is going to equal PRT. So this is the relationship between interest, what we call principal, rate, and time for either a loan or an investment. So hopefully it makes sense that I represents the interest. Now I use the word accrued there, so I represents the interest that is accrued. The accrued interest, the word accrued takes the place of the word charged or earned, so I could have put charged or earned there, but accrued just means it could be charged on a loan or earned on an investment. So it's the interest fee itself that you're either being charged or you are earning. So the accrued word takes away the positive or negative aspect of the other words. Okay, it's just here's your fee. P in the formula represents what we call the principal. And the principal, I don't think that's the wrong principal. Yeah. Principal. A-L? Yeah, principal, not like a... You know the difference between the two words. The principle that I put on there first time, the LE, that's like your principles, rules types of things. I don't know how to describe that. Ask your English teacher. Okay, anyway, it's AL. So P represents the principal, and principal is the starting amount of money. So what's the starting amount of money that you put into your investment, or what's the starting amount of money that you borrow? Okay, R represents the interest rate that you are being charged, or the rate that you're being given for your loan or earning on your investment. And rate is always given as a percent, but the percent is just a translation of the fraction or decimal form. So we have to take the percent that we're given and input it as a fraction or a decimal into our formula. Okay, so we know how to convert from percents to decimals, so that's good. And then the last part of the formula is T, and then T represents the time period for the loan. Now your rate and your time, they could be yearly, could be monthly, could be weekly, could be daily, could be really any increment of time, but the units for the rate and the time have to match. So if you have a rate that's yearly, then your time has to be in years. If you have a rate that's monthly, then your time has to be in months, and so on. So the units must match for those two variables in your formula. Okay, so the units must match. Units must match. Okay, so let's look at some examples of just using our formula. So example 1, we're given a principal amount of $2,000, a rate of 4%, and a time of 2 years. This is asking us to figure out how much interest we would earn if this were an investment, or we would be charged if this was a loan. What is the interest accruing on this principal amount at 4% for 2 years? Now first, 4%, remember, means 4 out of 100. So I could put 4 out of 100 into my formula, or I could put 0.04. I'm going to go ahead and use the decimal, although either one is fine. So in this case, I is going to equal principal, 2,000, times rate, which is 0.04, times time, which is 2. And notice that this is a rate per year and a time in years. Those units match, so we're good to plug everything into the formula as is. And nothing to do to solve here. This is just going into the calculator from here. So 2,000 times 0.04 times 2 is going to be 160, and that's $160 of interest accruing. So if you invested that money at that rate for that amount of time, you would earn $160, or if you borrowed that amount of money for that at that rate for that amount of time, you would have to pay back the $2,000 that you borrowed plus that $160 fee. Okay, so the interest earned here, or accrued here, is 160. All right, let's try another one. So we have, this time, the interest is given to us on a principal amount of $1,200 at 8% per year, and we're asked to find the time. So again, let's make this 8% per year. 8% is 8 out of 100, so that's going to be 0.08. And so we have, our interest is given, so I is 288 equals principal of 1,200 times rate at 0.08 times time. We don't know this time, so this time t is going to be the variable that stays in our formula. And this one's going to require an extra step. So first, let's multiply the 12. Sorry, I have a lot going on in my calculator here. The 1,200 and the 0.08, that's going to give us 96. So we have 288 equal to 96t, and now we know how to solve this. If t is being multiplied by 96, then we're going to divide both sides by 96, and now we can see that t has to equal, let's take our 288 divided by 96, and that's 3. So t has to equal 3, and because that's a rate per year, this is a time in years, so we're going to say 3 years for this one. So if you invested $1,200 at 8% for 3 years, then you could have $288 earned in interest, or paid as a fee if that were a loan. Okay? Moving right along. This time we have an interest principal, and we're looking for a rate. So we have 225 equal to 1,500 times some rate. So let's leave r in there, and times 5. So the order that we multiply doesn't matter. You know, if you multiply 2 times 3 times 4, 2 times 3 would be 6 times 4 would be 24, or 3 times 4 would be 12 times the 2 would be 24 in either case. So since the order we multiply doesn't matter, we have what we call the commutative property of multiplication. We can start by multiplying these two numbers, and 1,500 times 5 is 7,500. So right now we have 225 equal to 7,500, and we still have r on this side. So to solve for r, again, we have to divide. So we're going to divide both sides by 7,500, and then r is going to equal, let's see, 225 divided by 7,500 is 0.03. So 0.03 as a decimal is, or as a fraction, is 3 out of 100, which means we're looking at 3%. So 3% is our rate. So we turn it into a decimal to put it in the formula, and then we take it back to a percent when we take it out of the formula. Okay? All right, I think this would be a good opportunity maybe for you to, oh, no, just kidding. I was going to say try this one, but there's something a little different happening, so let's go ahead and do this one together. So I is going to equal principal times rate times time, but notice what's happening here. Oh, let me go back to this one. This should be 3% per year. What's happening in number 4 is we have a rate per year and then a time that's in months. So we either have to convert the rate to a time in months, or we have to convert the time to a time in years, which I think would be easier to do. 6 months is how much out of the year? Well, that's 6 months out of the 12 months for a year. So 6/12ths of a year, or half of the year. Okay? And then 3%, remember that's 3 out of 100. So we're going to put in 0.03. So I is going to equal 500 times 0.03 times, since that's a rate per year, our time is 6/12ths. And it's really okay not to reduce that because it's going to end up going into the calculator anyway, but if you wanted to put it in as a half, that would also be totally fine. But now we can go straight to the calculator. So we have 500 and 0.03 and half of the year, 6/12ths of the year. 6 out of the 12 months. And that's going to be 7.5. And that's $7.50, even though the zero's not there. We're going to tack that on because that is an amount of money. So $7.50 in interest would be earned there. Doesn't seem like a real huge amount, okay? But every little bit counts. And that's just 6 months. All right, let's look at a few more where we have to do some conversions. So here we have, again, a time in years. We're going to want to convert this 65 days. So 3.5% is 3.5 out of 100. And if you don't like that, 3.5 out of 100 is 0.035. So 0.035 is the decimal I'm going to go with. And then 65 days is 65 out of 365 days for the year. So it's 65 out of 365 years. So if you want to convert to years, just divide by how many of those items are in years. So if you're going months to years, divide by 12 because there are 12 months in a year. If you're going days to years, you're going to divide by 365 because there are 365 days in a year. If you were going to go weeks to years, you would divide by 52 because there are 52 weeks in a year. Okay? So you divide by how many of those items there are in your year. All right, so I is going to equal principal of 890, rate at 0.035, time at 65 over 365, and now we go to the calculator. So 890, 0.035, and 65 out of 365. Again, totally okay not to reduce because it goes into the calculator anyway. So this is about 5.547, but since we're going to, again, this is an amount of money, we're going to go ahead and round to the hundredths place. So after the 4 is a 7, which means that's going to round up to $5.55 in interest. Okay? All right, moving right along. Hopefully we're feeling okay with this. This is 6% per year. So 6% is 6 out of 100, so 0.06 is our decimal. And 3 months is 3 out of 12 months for the year, so that's 3/12ths of a year. Okay? So we have interest at 675 equals sum principal times a rate of 0.06 times a time of 3/12ths. So we need to do a little bit of solving on this one. First, let's go ahead and multiply 0.06 times 3/12ths, and again, totally okay to not reduce. You get 0.015, so we have 0.015 in front of our principal. So if we want to solve, we're going to have to divide that amount over. So divide by 0.015. It's going to cancel that out, leave us with 1p equal to, let's see, 6.75 divided by 0.015 gives us 450. So this is a principal amount of $450. Okay, so it would take a principal amount of $450 at 6% per year for 3 months to earn $6.75 in interest, or to be charged that amount if it were a loan. Okay, so I think you have enough tools now to be able to try this next problem. So if you're feeling confident, go ahead and give it a shot. Otherwise, let's see, we have a principal amount, we have a rate per day, and a time in days. Now, these are matching units, which means we don't have to make a conversion here. Good news. But we do want to make this decimal or this percent a decimal. So 1.4% is 1.4 out of 100, which is 0.014 as a decimal. So interest is going to be 25,000 times 0.014, and then times 15. Again, we don't have to convert since days and days are matching. So interest is going to equal some amount that the calculator is going to give us. 25,000 times 0.014 times 15, and that's 5250. So $5,250 is a lot. Did I miss a decimal in there? Let's see, 0.014, nope, that's it, 5,250. Okay, it's a lot of money this time because that's a lot of, the higher the principal is, the higher the interest is going to be. And of course you have 1.4% per day for 15 days. Even if that was 1.4% per year for 15 years, right, that would be a long time. It's not a long time, but it's 15 times you're calculating that interest. Okay, so that's our formula. Let's get a couple of applications, a couple of places where we could use such a formula. So number 7, it says Mario needs to borrow $2,200 from the bank. He's agreed to an 18-month loan with a 7.5% simple interest rate. Assuming no other fees are added, what is the total amount that he's going to have to repay the bank? So the total amount that he's going to have to repay the bank, that's going to be the principal that he borrowed. The principal he borrowed plus the interest, right? So we know he's going to have to pay back the $2,200. The thing is, we don't know how much interest is going to be accrued yet. So we have to figure out the interest. We know the principal amount borrowed is $2,200. We know the rate. It was a 7.5% simple interest rate. And then we know the time is 18 months. Now, there's something missing. Well, it appears to be missing, but there's something we have to understand. When you're given a simple interest rate, if the units aren't given, so if it doesn't say that it's per month or per year or whatever, if it doesn't give a unit with the rate, it's implied that it is a yearly simple interest rate. So when units aren't given, it's yearly. Okay, so in simple interest is yearly if units aren't given. If units aren't given with the rate, assume, I hate to assume things, but this is what we do. We assume that it's yearly. Okay, it's implied that it is yearly. Okay, so this is going to be per year. So we have to convert this 7.5%, so 7.5 out of 100 to a decimal, 0.075, and we have to make this 18 months out of 12 months in a year, so 18/12 years, which is a year and a half. So if you wanted to put in 1.5, that's the same thing you would get if you took 18 and divided it by 12, right? It's a year and a half, 1.5. Okay, so we're looking at I equals 2,200 principal times rate 0.075 times t, which is 18/12. And so we're going to calculate that now. 2,200 times 0.075 times 18/12. And we get 247.5. 247.5, so that's $247.50. So again, he's going to have to pay back the bank the $2,200 that he borrowed plus the $247.50 that they're charging him for borrowing the money. So the total repaid is going to be the $2,200 plus the $247.50, which is going to be $2,447.50. And hopefully that makes sense. Okay? All right, we got one last one. Gilbert decided to pawn his guitar for money. The pawn shop gave him $240, and after 30 days, he pays $288 to get his guitar back. Find the annual simple interest rate that he was charged. So if we're looking for simple interest, we're looking for the rate. Find the annual. Annual is another word for yearly. Okay, this is telling us the rate is our question. So if we know that the rate is going to be the question, that means we have to have been given the other three variables in our formula. So let's start with the pawn shop gave him $240. That's the initial principal amount that he borrowed, $240. So I know that's going to go there. And it's after 30 days, so 30 days is going to be our time. He pays $288 to get his guitar back. Now the $288 is not interest. If he pays back $288 but he only borrowed $240, then the difference is the interest. So the interest is the amount he paid back minus the amount that he borrowed. So that means there's $48 in interest. Okay? $48 in interest. So now we have 48 equal to 240 times some rate times time. Now, it says to find the annual rate. So if we want this to be yearly, then we want this to be 30 out of 365 days in the year. Okay, so 30 365ths of a year is what we're looking at. So for time, we have to put in 30 over 365. So we have 240 times 30 over 365, which is that amount. And let's just say that's about 19.73-ish. So 48 is going to be about 19.73 times R. So we want to divide that amount over. So we're going to divide 19.73. And I don't necessarily like that I've rounded that before dividing because my answer is going to be a little off. So here's what I'm going to do. I want 48 to be divided by that exact amount. So I'm going to take this where I've already typed in and say I want 48 to be divided by that whole thing. Let me see. Let's put it in parentheses. 48, close those parentheses. There we go. Take that. And then let me put, yeah, there we go. That whole amount, I want 48 to be divided. There, no, gosh, didn't want to transfer for me. Okay, so let me just move it. 248, 240, and 360 over 365. So you see I'm just retyping that in there because I don't want to round. And I can actually see what the difference is going to be. So I end up with 2.43 repeating. So this is 2.43 repeating. Now let's just see how different it is if I use the rounded version. So if I just divide by 19.73, it's a negligible difference, so about 2.3. Okay, so we'd be all right with rounding then if you're okay with that. But later on we're going to get to some more complicated formulas and we don't want to round. We want to round as little as possible because it just creates more error. But 243, does that mean our rate is 2.43%? Now remember, to take our, it goes into the formula as a decimal, it comes out as a percent. We have to convert it back to a percent, and we want to go from a decimal to a percent. We have to multiply by 100, right? If it was 0.03 times 100, there's 3%. So if it's 2.43, if we multiply that by 100, we're looking at 243%. So that's 243.3 repeating, technically, percent, which is astronomical, okay? And that's kind of how pawn shops work. Now, it doesn't seem like that big of a deal because he only borrows money for 30 days. So if he pays back 48 bucks, maybe it doesn't seem like that big of a deal. The issue is if if you don't actually pay it back in a reasonable amount of time, or if you borrow a larger amount of money, the interest rate is so ridiculously high that you're going to be paying back way, way, way more than you borrowed. So in general, I would say stay away from pawn shops if it's some emergency situation. And maybe if you know how, I don't even know if you know how pawn shops work, but when he goes to pawn his guitar, that means the pawn shop is saying your guitar is worth 240 bucks, so we'll take your guitar and we'll loan you the 240. And then after 30 days, if he's supposed to pay them this 288 to get his guitar back, he pays and they gets the guitar back. So it's a loan with collateral basically, but the reason that the pawn shop is willing to do this is, one, because they're going to loan you the money at a super high rate, but two, if you don't pay them back, they keep the guitar and they haven't lost anything because the guitar was worth what they gave you in the first place, if that makes sense, okay? But they're going to charge you astronomical rates. So if you can wait, right, save up money to do something versus borrowing from a pawn shop or like a title loan place, one of those car title loan places, you just don't do it, okay, because they're charging you crazy amounts of money. All right, so I think you have enough to go on to get started with this first practice assignment, but as always, if you need some extra help, then just reach out. Okay, take care, guys.